because even on a TV show, you could be required to do more work than you think. You know, it's not uncommon to turn a draft to the boss, the showrunner, and say, "Do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again." And technically, you're not really getting paid extra for that, but that's part of your salary. I mean, you are, because you're getting a weekly salary, and that's part of the salary. You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Michael Jamin. I'm here with Philadelphia Phil Hudson, and this is Screenwriters Need to Hear This, the podcast. Do 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 do. That's our theme song, and because we're writers, we don't really write music. But today we're talking about today's subject is called day to day. What it's really like to be a professional TV writer, and so this is gonna be like a nuts and bolts. A lot of people want to know, like, what is it really like? What do I really actually do on a day to day? And honestly, it just depends on what is going on in my life at that moment. Like if I'm literally on a show, then it's one thing. If I'm running a show, it's another thing. If I'm in between gigs, if I'm developing, it's different. So I'll try to go through a bunch of different scenarios and really like hope you let you live it as if you're walking through it. But there's really there's no one day. That's part of part of the joy of the job is that it's it's so variable. And also depends if you're in production or you're in pre-production or post-production. But on a day-to-day basis, this is how it kind of goes. When I'm employed, when I'm on a show, it kind of depends if whether I'm on a single camera show or multi-camera show or animation. It just depends. But you have pre-production. That's like the perfect time. That's when the writers really are working on figuring out what the episodes are going to be. We're writing all the episodes. Pre-production might be 10, maybe 12 weeks on a short order show or something like that. And that's kind of when everything's okay. The hours are okay. You're working kind of banker's hours, or maybe you're working from 10 to like 6 or so. And that's when things are kind of sane. And so that's kind of like the writing period. That's pre-production. But once you go into production, everything goes out the window. And it really depends on what kind of show you're doing. You could be working there's a lot of rewriting that has to get done. Sometimes you don't get all the work done, all the writing in pre-production, and you have to do it while you're shooting at the same time. Sometimes you get notes from back from the network. Sometimes you're on the set and the scene isn't working. You have to rewrite it while you're there. And that's when the hours can get really bad. And if you're on a multi-camera show, it's not uncommon to work 14 hours a day. That's a long day. Many days in a row, sometimes weekends, because you have to do the rewrite. You have to get the work done. So that's what it's like to be on a multi-camera show. You are going to be working really bad hours. On a single camera show, there tends to be less rewriting because there's less rehearsal and you're shooting every day. So the hours tend to be a little better on a single camera show. Not always though. And then on an animated show, the hours tend to be kind of sane, because more like banker's hours were maybe like 10 to 7. It's kind of unusual to get out by dinner time. Most shows you'll be working past dinner on most shows if you're in production, even animation. But on King of the Hill, like that's kind of what it was, or any of the other, or Glenn Martin, which we ran. Those hours were pretty good in terms of TV. Like you'd only work to like 7, which is a long day, and you're fried at the end of the day. But at least you're not working till 2 a.m, which I've done plenty of times, and that gets old. So that's when you are on a show in production. Sometimes you are on. Some people say, "Well, are the writers allowed to be on set?" And I'm like, "Allowed. The writers have to be on set. Like it's not like allowed makes it sound like it's a joy."
Well, that's a difference between film and television, right? Because in film it's a director's medium, but in TV, the showrunner, the head writer, it's their show. And so your writer is an emissary of the showrunner, and that's why they're there, to make sure that they get what the showrunner wants.
Exactly. So sometimes the showrunner will be the only writer on set. Sometimes the showrunner will send one of the higher up levels, like a co-executive producer, to be their proxy. Or sometimes the showrunner will send the writer who actually wrote that episode on set. It just depends how the showrunner wants to run it. And sometimes the showrunner has all the writers on set to do rewriting. It just depends on what the showrunner gets to decide, basically. So however he or she wants to do it. So that's a very fast description of what it's like to be in production. And I didn't even go into the details. I kind of just want to, there's more to talk about when you're not in pre-production. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, as is the case now, we'll have a show in production, and then it'll wrap or whatever. We won't be involved in the production. We'll only be involved in the pre-production, and then my partner and I will go off and try to sell. We'll try to develop. So sometimes my partner and I will work maybe a half a day, or coming up with ideas, and we get fried, and we're working on development, and then we're constantly coming up with ideas. And by the way, when that happens, we're not getting paid. So we are trying to sell a show. Then we'll hopefully take that show out and pitch it. And then if you sell it, then you are in development. And then you'll work full days working on an outline, working on a rewrite, a first draft, a second draft. And then sometimes you'll have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks as you're waiting for notes. And it's always hurry up and wait. Everyone wants the note. They always want the script immediately. And very often it'll take them longer to actually read it than it took for us to write it, which is a crime as far as I'm concerned. It's so disrespectful, but that's just how it goes. And so you'll have to sit around and you have to wait for them to decide whether they want, and it's often because it's committee. They have to have 1,000 different people read it to decide what their opinion is. And so that's just how that goes. And you're waiting for notes from higher ups or whatever. So there could be a lot of hurry up and wait. But when you're in development, then the hours tend to be a lot saner. You tend to be working, again, the hours that you want to work. My partner and I, we try to work sane hours. We get there, around 10 in the morning, and we're a full day would be working till 3, from 10 to 3, because you can't work so much on one thing. You get fried, unless we're, against the gun, then we'll work a little longer. But that's what a day looks like.
Can I ask you a question about post-production? What does post-production look like?
Okay, so what is post-production? So post-production is after the show is shot, everything's in the can. Now you have to put it together. And so that involves editing, coloring, music spotting, mixing, which you check all the levels of the audio levels, and then you finally deliver the cut to the network. The network may have notes, and there's a lot of back and forth. You're always getting notes. It's never like you just say, hey, here it is. They always have something to say, and that they're entitled to. They're paying for it. And so the hours on that, it depends. What will happen is, as a showrunner, the most writers are not involved in post-production at all. So usually just the showrunner is involved in that. And so what happens is the director will go in and they'll work on the editor will assemble a cut. The editor will take several days putting together a cut. Then the director will sit with the editor for several days giving notes on their cut. Then the director will turn their cut into the showrunner. The showrunner looks at it, and the showrunner may say, this is great, or this needs to be completely redone. And even if it's great, I still have notes. Believe me, there's always notes. But it's not uncommon for a director to turn in something which is absolutely wrong. And it the minute you watch it. You go, the pacing is slow. There's no life. The shot selection is wrong. And it's pretty obvious to any showrunner who's done it for any amount of time when something works and doesn't work. It's not, to me, it doesn't really feel like a matter of opinion. It almost feels like fact. I know this can be better. I know this is worse. And sometimes I'll experiment with it. I go, okay, you know what? I couldn't make it better. So let's go back to the director's cut. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll say, I'll say to the editor, because you literally sit next to the editor, sit side by side. This is before COVID. Now it's done on Zoom. But you sit at the editor's side, and you say, this doesn't work. Let me see the editor's cut. And often the editor's cut, not often, or sometimes the editor's cut is better than the director's cut. It just depends. Because a director will only work on a show often for, a couple episodes, but the editor works on the show all the time, every episode. And so it's not uncommon for an editor to have a better feel for what the showrunner wants than the director does, who's actually just
they can anticipate what the showrunner wants, right? Because they are hearing those notes all day, every day, and might have for seasons.
Yeah, and so my partner, we try to work with a lot of the same editors because they know us, they get us, and there's a lot of trust with them. They know what we like, but also I trust them that I'll sit with them. And I go, well, what do you think here? What's your opinion? And then they'll say this, and I go, okay, good. That's just you. I trust you. Let's go with that. So it's a lot of that's why I have my favorite editors, because I like their sensibility and their style. Because honestly, a show can be made in post-production. It can be ruined. It can be made in post-production. And people think, well, I don't understand. You just shot it. No, post-production editing is so important for the pacing and the shot selection. A scene that's played in a master in a wide, it's not going to feel emotional. It probably won't, because you don't see the faces on the actors. So you may want to cut to singles, or our two shot will feel very differently than switching to singles, because singles you can pace up. You can go cut from this shot to this shot, but in a two shot, you're playing it all in a two shot. You can't pace up the scene. You can't cut the spaces between and what an actor is saying. You can't something to cut to. So you need those singles. So all of it can be made. And I know this is not what we're really talking about, but so I can spend a lot of time in post-production, but the hours are never really that bad. Often you're just there for a few hours a day or half a day doing post, and then you have to wait a couple of days for the next step.
Right. And as a showrunner with a partner, you've mentioned in the past that sometimes you are there, sometimes your writing partner is there. And you kind of, one of you is on set, one of you is in post, handling that during. I work on Tacoma FD, and I'm the post PA, or have been the post PA for the last couple seasons. And that's very much, those two guys are cutting simultaneously with two different editors, but because they're doing so much stuff during production, no real post-production is happening till we wrap. The editors are putting together assembly cuts, and they're putting together dailies so that the showrunners can review them over weekends and on breaks. But they're sitting down with their notes and the editors and cutting everything after we're done, just to make sure that they're able to get the show that they want, because they time them.
Yeah. And some, and by the way, I don't want to discount what directors do. I don't want to make it sound like, well, they're just like cogs in the machine. There are directors who really can put together a really good cut. And I remember, we went on Marin, we had a really difficult scene to shoot. It was really, really difficult. It involved like Mark hallucinating, and Lynn Shelton was directing, and we were always panicked. I was like, this is going to be hard. And then she put together a cut, and it didn't work. And I was like, oh no, I had to go in and watch it. And I'm struggling with it. I was struggling watching. I was like, I think I know how to cut this together. I'm not sure. And then a couple of days later, she said she knew it didn't work. And she sent me more notes. She goes, I figured it out. Try this. Because she had already delivered her cut. She was done, but she was still working on it in her head. And she saved it. She saved it a couple of days later.
That's awesome.
Because she knew she had to figure it out in her head after it was already cut. And so some directors, it's not always that easy. And this is why shot coverage is so important, why you have to cover the scene so many different ways. And I remember in that scene, we couldn't cover it as many times as we wanted to, simply because for time constraints. And so it was like, I remember talking to her beforehand, do you know how this is going to cut together? And she's, yeah, I know how it's going to cut together. I'm like, I'm glad you do, because I'm not sure how it was going to cut together. And we both struggled. So, but yeah, so some directors are really great. I just want to make sure I throw that in there. So that's what post-production can look like. And it's very cushy. Post-production is for me, it's always the cushiest. You're just going in and you can really make the show, and it's kind of fun. Then you sit in post and you sit in the mixing session. That's a couple hours. It's very laid back. It's all very civilized.
That's something some people may not know. Can you explain what mixing is? Because I think this is a little nebulous to people.
Yeah, mixing session. So after you do a music spotting session, so that's when you sit with the music supervisor and the composer, and you'll say, here's the cut. We're going to need music. I want a sting here. This should be a happy sting. This should be a sad song. And sometimes we'll license something. We purchase it. Sometimes the composer will compose something. And this is where we talk about it there. And we get choices. And then you'll go off. You'll hear it later. Often it's at the mixing session. You'll hear the music and you go, okay, we got way too much music here. Or I don't like that cue. Pull out that cue. You're really just mixing the levels and the audio. But you're also doing things like background things, like usually, quiet on the set, right? You don't want noise on the set. But then when you go into the mixing session, you're adding the noise back in. You're adding the ruffling of a newspaper. You're adding birds
Foley
in the background. Foley. You could be doing Foley. You can be on an animated show. There is no background noise. It's all animated. So like on King of the Hill, if the guys were in the alley, you have to add in the sound of the birds, in the alley, the birds chirping. And I remember being in a mixing session and I'm thinking, I stopped it. I go, why are there so many birds? It sounds like we are in an aviary. What is going on? And the guy's like, oh, okay, let's pull out some of these birds. And so we cut the birds in half. I'm like, we still got too many birds. And then what happens is you're listening it to you're listening to the sound on what they call the bigs. So the bigs are these big giant stadium speakers, and that so that you can hear everything. But most people are not listening to their watching the show on a stadium speaker with they're listening, even if they have a home theater or they have their speakers are much smaller. So then you'll say, okay, we hear it on the bigs, let's hear it on the smalls. And then you spend all this time mixing it for the bigs. Then you hear it on the smalls, and you're like, I don't hear any. The stuff that I heard on the bigs, I don't hear anything at all. And now and half the people are going to be watching on their phone, and they're not going to hear a fraction of what you hear on the smalls. And so it's really hard today to do a mixing session to make sure that people can hear it on whatever device they're consuming it on. Because you want to make sure all of it, the songs can be heard, the music, the lyrics, and the vocals, and also the dialogue and all that stuff. And so that's what that's the mixing session. That's when you try to get all those levels just right. And you can spend hours and hours. And then, like I said, you play it back on the smalls and you go, okay, I don't even hear it anymore. Or you're watching at home and you go, okay, all those birds, I don't hear any of the birds. We spent hours trying to
should have doubled the birds. Should have doubled the birds.
We should have doubled the bird. Yeah. But it becomes distracting too if you have too many birds. So
yeah. So to note for listeners, the things you're describing are not typical for a writer. They're typical for an executive producer.
Executive producer, showrunner, right? Most writers, sometimes a writer will be invited to a mixing session. It's like, hey, you want to come? And you'll get their, you let them as a treat, and often they'll, you let them voice their opinion. But sometimes you kind of don't want it. You're like, listen, I'm running out of time. I don't really want to deal with any more notes from anybody. But sometimes but it's also important to let them sit in just so that they are experienced enough so that when the time comes and they have their own show, it's not all brand new to them. So I had been in mixing sessions even before I was a showrunner, and I sat through, recording sessions.
And you've been kind enough to invite me to mixing sessions before in the past too. So
it's fun. It's fun to sit. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So post-production, mixing.
Then there's more. There's more to talk about. So people say, well, what about vacation, right? Just so you know, if you want to be a TV writer, you do not get vacation. Your vacation is called unemployment. With very rare exceptions. So when I was on King of the Hill, that was an animated show, and that was year round. And so on that show, I think we had 3 weeks of vacation. We could, as long as we told the boss and it worked fine, you can make a vacation and you can actually go somewhere. But on any other show, I've never, ever had a vacation. It's unemployment. So if you're lucky, you'll be, back in the day on Just Shoot Me and shows like that, you'd work, let's say 24 episodes or 22 episodes a season. That's a full season. Then you'd take a hiatus. That's like, whatever, 9 months of work. You take a 2-3 months hiatus, then you go back to work. And during that hiatus, you're not getting paid, but you're exhausted from those crazy 14-hour days you've done. And that's your downtime. You could travel, you could do whatever you want, but you're not getting paid. You just hope that you're not going to get fired. But today, with their series orders so much smaller, it's unusual to be on a show to get 22 episodes. I mean, some shows do, of course. But this year on Game of Thrones, what do they do? 13 or something? And that was obviously a hit show. So it's now for a writer, you don't have the luxury of, a vacation. You're just saying, okay, this is my unemployment time, and I'm going to trust that I can afford to take a vacation. So that's the reality. No, you don't get vacation. You get unemployment. Right. Sometimes it's not uncommon to spend more time in a year looking for work than actually working. That's not uncommon. And looking for work often means doing free work. And so for the people who say, I already wrote a script. How many spec scripts do I write? Do I have to write another? Do I have to write another? If the idea of working for free makes your stomach, turn, just know that you will always be working for free at some point, even later in your career. Even you're me, I have plenty of work that I have to do for free. I'll try to come up with an idea. I'll spend weeks or months on it, and it won't sell. And that's just how it goes. That's how it is. That's the reality, the day-to-day reality of being a TV writer. Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist. So
on on that note, when you talk about free work, early on when I was first learning about writing and you learn about the WGA and you look it up, it's like, oh, they have all these protected things. There are steps to protect writers from the unpaid producers draft and all that other stuff. How do you balance the spec pilot process with the protections of the WGA?
Also, that's all, I'm a big fan of the WGA. That's all well and good, but in reality, there's really not much they can do to protect a writer from those 3 steps. So what that means is, especially in the world, that's one of the reasons I really did not like working in features. I prefer working in TV. But in features, what usually works is a writer will pitch an idea to a producer, a big producer. Then the producer will bring that idea to a studio and try to sell it. So now the producer is attached, and it just makes it easier to get this thing sold if you have a producer attached. But the drawback is, if you could call it a drawback, so let's say hopefully you sell it, but now the producer is going to use their expertise to help guide the script. And so you're going to turn in draft after draft for outline, and then draft after draft to the producer, and the producer is going to have notes. And the studio, who's paying the bills, the studio is going to say, yeah, you have to, we're going to pay you for an outline, a first draft, a second draft, and a polish and a revision or whatever. That's how it works. So let's say 5 steps. But the producer is going to say, well, yeah, but it's not ready to turn in. I don't have a good feeling about this draft. I don't feel like this draft is good enough to turn into the studio. And then you're going to, well, I think it's good enough. And the producers will say, well, I don't think it's good enough. Don't you want to get it made? And then they are going to literally guilt you into doing more work, more steps before you can turn in this script to the studio. And there's not much the guild can do to protect you. And maybe the producer's right. Maybe it does make it better. Maybe it makes it worse. I don't know. But there's really not much you can do. And common sense is going to say, well, this producer knows more about this than I do, probably because they're successful. And the producer is not, they don't want to turn into the studio yet. They don't feel it's ready. They don't feel it reflects their expertise. And so they may or may not agree with you. They may be the roadblock, and they may require you to do a free rewrite, a free step before they're willing to turn it into the studio. And it's a gray area. What are you going to do? There's really not much that can be done, and the studio can be done, because the producer's not paying you, the studio's paying you. But it's just another reason why I don't prefer to work. It's why I prefer to work in TV. You don't have to worry about that in TV.
Yeah. I think from going through the process of the podcast and helping with the course and that kind of stuff, I think the main note I've got from you is don't stress about those details. Focus on telling a great story first.
Yeah, those are all high-class problems, by the way. Yeah, they're high-class problems. Well, how, am I spending too much time on this paid project? It's like, well, at least you're getting paid,
Right.
So you don't have to worry about that. And by the way, I should probably amend that, because even on a TV show, you could be required to do more work than you think. It's not uncommon to turn a draft to the boss, the showrunner, and them say, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. And technically, you're not really getting paid extra for that, but that's part of your salary. I mean, you are, because you're getting a weekly salary, and that's part of the salary.
Okay.
So,
outside of that, are there any other benefits that come from being a working writer? Like, I know the WGA has pension and healthcare and that kind of stuff. Do you want to talk about that or anything else?
Well, yeah. So that's where we get our health insurance from, is through the Writers Guild, and we get our pension through the Writers Guild. And so part of our salary when we get a job, that they pay into that. And so, it's a huge benefit. Or if you didn't, you wouldn't have health insurance. You wouldn't have, your pension. And that's why I like working on all WGA shows. And people say, well, when do I join the WGA? You join when you sell a certain number of projects. You have to earn a certain number of points. Then the WGA says, okay, now you can join. It's not like anyone can join. You have to qualify to join.
Yeah, and we've talked about this because Mike Rapp, who was our script coordinator, got bumped. He did a freelance episode, which gave him a certain number of points, but that wasn't enough to join the WGA. But then he got hired as a staff writer, and so I think it's 4 points per thing you sell. You need 24 points to join, but being on staff, you get 2 points per week in addition to the points you get for the draft for the episode you're going to write. And so just by being staffed for like 12 weeks or whatever it is, that's plenty, even if you don't get a script.
And then you have to. I didn't know that. And then you have to pay an induction fee too.
Yep, and they take it out of your check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a one-time fee, but then on top of that, you have to pay a small percentage of your
money of your earnings back in. But that
Yeah.
does go to your retirement and to your healthcare, which is probably still cheaper than what I'm paying on the open market right now for myself and my family.
Yeah. I'm sure. Oh yeah. Our insurance is really good. No one complains about the Writers Guild insurance. But also the Writers Guild gives you these protections, minimums, but also you wouldn't have gotten any of these if it wasn't for the writers that went before you that struck and did all these sacrifices. You wouldn't be making this kind of money, or you wouldn't have any of these health insurance or anything. So, it stinks that they take the money from you, but again, that's how it goes. That's what you're paying for, and again, you wouldn't have had anything without the Writers Guild. So I don't complain about that. That's just
the basics of collective bargaining, right? The
Yeah.
basics of collective bargaining. And, I'm probably the capitalist on the podcast, and I understand the value of unions and these types of things for specialized work, which is what writing is. It protects credits, and it protects the fact that these people can do this job. And that's the person you go to. So I think the note that I would give people is don't stress too much about those things. But when you are in the WGA, now you have a massive resource and a machine that can help you and protect you and make sure. And I've heard stories of people who checks were late and the WGA got wind of it, and they contacted the studio and made them pay back interest on delayed payments because of monies that they weren't able to get, based on free market interest rates. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, the Writers Guild is they're tough. I'm of all the guilds, I think my opinion is they're the toughest in terms of fighting for their members. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you talked about minimums and payments and stuff. Do you want to go over minimums for things like comedy, drama, that kind of stuff?
Well, people are like, well, how much money am I going to get paid? And so it just depends if you're running a network show, a cable show, an hour long, half hour, whatever. And so what you can do, if you're really curious about it, you would go to the WGA website and search for the schedule of minimums. Yep. And that will tell you. It's a PDF, right? And they'll tell you how much the studio has to pay you if it's a guild show. They could pay you more. You can negotiate for more, but the bottom line is they have to pay you at least this much, and it's usually a good amount.
Yeah, so, I want to say like for a spec script, for a spec feature, it's like $70K. It's not nothing. Like, it might be more. It might be like 130. I think.
But it also depends on the budget. 70. But that depends on the budget that might be a lower budget. I think for a higher budget, they have to pay you more. So I don't know. I don't know much about features, so what do I know? But yeah, all that information is out there if you want to get it. You go to the WGA website, search for schedule of minimums. And so that's the day-to-day, I hope to tell you that. Like some people say, can you make a living? Well, yeah, some people can, some people can't. I mean, it just depends how often you're working, and yeah. It just depends.
Do you think your advice
depends.
I was gonna ask, do you think your advice on some of our earlier podcasts about putting yourself out there and owning your work and effectively branding yourself, I'm assuming that would help you keep and continue to work if people consider you and think of you as this type of writer who does this type of thing?
Me personally, you mean?
No, I'm just saying in general advice you gave to put yourself out there, make stuff, don't put content out, but put out high quality things.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that would help.
I don't think it hurts. I mean, it raises your profile and it shows more people what you can do, and you have a built-in audience. And so like, even now with me, I have an audience now. When I have a show I can want to promote, I can go on my platform and promote it. And so that's something I didn't have a year ago. So that only helps,
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'm all out of thoughts. Okay. But if anybody wants to, we have a lot of goodies that we give out on our site.
Yeah, we do. So first thing, again, we have the free lesson. It's the first lesson from your course. I think it's split up into 3, and you kind of give a little bit of extra notes on that. So you can sign up for that at michaeljamin.com/free. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's a gold mine of information just sitting in there. Number 2 is the online screenwriting course. And again, if you haven't heard about that, you should go check it out. We're seeing a lot of success with the members of that group. It's a really impressive group too. I think we've talked about the value of having almost like a barrier to entry, if you will, for people who are interested in taking this seriously. So the type of writers that we get in there are very serious. They organize their own weekly table reading session where
that impressed me. Scripts. They made I didn't even know you could do this, because we have a private Facebook group just for people in the course, and then they made a room. I didn't know you could do this. You can make a room in the
They were doing it on Zoom, and I joined one a couple weeks ago, and had a great experience. Read Lori's script, and it was really really eye opening. I think everyone gives quick feedback on it, and then I just mentioned that you could do a room right there in the group, so that you didn't have this technical barrier of trying to download Zoom and get people in because people were showing up late. And they tested out. This was Dave Crossman and was it Glenn Toussaint, I think is how you say his last name. Yeah, they put that together with a couple other people, and it's
so that was
blowing up.
Yeah, I was like, that's cool. I didn't even know you could do that. I'm glad you mentioned it to them. But it's good. So there's like and that's a great networking opportunity. These people, obviously, it's a networking. That's what they're doing.
Well, outside of that, I think, I personally have put 2 scripts out to people in that group to get notes back. And you're getting a different level of notes than I've had in film school or other places where people are talking theory. These are people who are hearing, they've learned your lessons, they know what the perspective is, what the job is. And so the notes are just a higher caliber, and they're pointing out the problems with the story, not, I don't like the way you said this, or you had a typo on page 5. You still get those, but you're also getting, hey, structurally, you're missing this beat. And I don't understand how this thing happens in act 3. And I don't think it was planted well in act 1, that kind of nuanced, really high level note. I'm getting a lot of that, but also I'm giving a lot of notes to people in that group too. And by reading so many scripts and having to think about that process and structure and storytelling, my writing's exponentially improved. So that's michaeljamin.com/course if you're interested in that. And I'd highly, highly recommend checking that out if you're serious about making this work. Outside of that, you got the watch list at michaeljamin.com/watch list, which are your top 3 videos. It's a weekly newsletter that goes out 100% free. We don't bombard people. We just send 1 email per week. And
get on that. It's just
great.
More free stuff.
Info.
Yeah.
I was going to say, outside of that is your social media. I don't think we talked about it in the last podcast. At Michael Jamin Writer on most social platforms, and you give out basically daily free screenwriting tips. And then you're on live Q&As all the time with people, just answering questions and talking to people, which is a lot of value. And we do post those on YouTube. We put the first one up this week, and got a bunch of people commenting, I didn't even know you went live. And this thing's from June 22nd.
Yeah, they missed it. But so especially on Instagram, I'll go live, and it's interesting. I try to add. That's where if you have if you can set your notifications up, you don't want to miss that, because people sometimes, if people send a question, and I think a lot of people, if I think a lot of people want to hear the answer, then I try to do a video on it. Especially if I think I can make a 3-minute video. If it's like, if I only get 10 seconds out of it, I might not answer it. But on a live, they got me. So if they ask me a question and I can answer it, whatever.
Yeah, and you're literally reading every single comment as you go through there while you have time and doing it. So
yeah, cool. I think, what kind of dog food should my dog have? I'll answer that. Whatever you want to know, I'll answer.
But again, I want to highlight this to the people who are listening to this podcast, who are not following you on social media, or who are not taking advantage of some of the free stuff that you're putting out there. Like, this is stuff that just did not exist 10 years ago. It's just, the level of accessibility that you give to people. I mean, you get to hear a showrunner giving you his opinion about Hollywood in 2022 when we're recording this, talking about the film market, talking about what people are looking for, talking about, the nuances of writing and being a professional. It's an incredible resource to people. And so I'd also encourage you, go share this with someone else who you think could value from this, and go leave a review. Let us know how we're doing. Go to iTunes and drop a review on the podcast, wherever you're listening to this, and make sure people know that Michael's doing this kind of stuff, because I would have killed for this type of content. I would have killed for it a year ago. And I'm just so grateful I have an opportunity to be here with you, man.
That's how you can thank us, is if you could just leave a review on iTunes, because that actually helps, people find us and helps us, come up in their search results and stuff like that. So that would be a good way, because obviously we're not charging for the podcast. So if you like it, please make the effort to just leave us a nice comment. 5 stars is great, but it's the comment, I think, is what really moves the needle, right, Phil?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. This was a nice talk.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.